Heidi by Johanna Spyri. Chapter 1. Up to the Alm Uncle. From the old and pleasantly situated town of Mayenfeld, a path leads through green, shady meadows to the foot of the mountains which look down from their majestic heights upon the valley below. As the footpath begins to slope gently upwards, the fragrance of the nearby heath, with its short grass and vigorous mountain plants, fills the air. Then the way becomes more rugged, and the path rises steeply toward the Alps. One bright, sunny morning in June, a tall, sturdy-looking girl of this mountainous country climbed the narrow mountain path, leading a child by the hand. The little girl's cheeks were aglow, and the bright crimson shone even through her brown, sunburned skin. This was not surprising, for in spite of the scorching sun, the child was wrapped up as though for protection against bitter frost. She wore 2, if not 3 frocks, one on top of the other, and in addition, a big red shawl was tied all round her body so that her little 5-year-old figure was scarcely discernible. In her heavy nailed mountain shoes, she toiled laboriously up the slope. The 2 figures had been climbing from the valley for about an hour when they reached the hamlet called Dorfli, which was situated halfway up the Alm. Here they were greeted with friendly calls from every doorway, for this was the girl's birthplace. But she hurried on until she had reached the last of the scattered little houses. And as she passed, a voice called from the doorway, "Wait for me, Data, if you are going up, and I will come too." She stood still. A stout, kind-looking woman came out of the house and joined them. "Where are you taking the child, Data?" she asked. "I suppose it is your sister's child, the orphan." "Yes," answered Data. "I am taking her to stay with the Alm Uncle." "Surely you aren't going to leave the child with him? You must be out of your mind, Data, but the old man is sure to turn you away in any case." "He can't do that. He is her grandfather. I have looked after the child up till now, and I can tell you, Barbel, I am not going to turn down the offer of a good job on her account. From now on, the grandfather will have to do his bit." "Oh well, if he were like other people," replied Barbel. "But you know him as well as I do. How can he look after a child, and especially such a little one? Oh, she will never stay with him. But where are you going, Dieter?" "To a very good job in Frankfurt," explained Dieter. "Well, I wouldn't like to be the child," said Barbel disapprovingly. "Nobody knows anything about the old man up there. He never speaks to anybody. With his bushy eyebrows and terrible beard, he looks a positive savage. The whole village is afraid of him." Still, Data persisted. He is the grandfather, and it's up to him to look after the child. "They say all sorts of terrible things about the old man," said Barbel, glancing keenly at her companion. "You must surely have heard his history from your sister, eh, Data?" "Perhaps I have, but I shan't say. It would be a fine thing for me if he found out I had been talking." Barbel had been eager for a long time to learn something about the old man, whom everybody referred to as the Alm Uncle. She wanted to know why he seemed to hate everybody, and why he lived all by himself up on the mountain. Confidentially, she took Data's arm. "Do tell me now, you have nothing to fear," she coaxed. Data looked round to see whether the child were nearby and might hear what she had to say, but the little one was not in sight. Data stopped in some consternation and looked back. There was no sign of the child. "Now I see her," cried Barbel at last. "Over there." She pointed far away from the path. "She is climbing the slopes with Peter, the goat herd, and his goats. He can look after the child, and you will be able to go on with your story." "She's good enough at looking after herself," said Data, "and perhaps it's a good thing, for the old man will not be able to provide for her very well. He has nothing now but his 2 goats and the Alm cottage." "Did he have more in his younger days?" asked Barbel. "Yes, I should think he did," replied Data with conviction. "He was brought up on one of the finest farms in Domlesch. He was the eldest son, but he lost the farm with his gambling and drinking, and when the story of his wild extravagance came out, his parents died of grief. He disappeared after that, and at first nobody knew where he had gone. Some said he joined the army in Naples. No more news came for about 12 to 15 years. Then suddenly he appeared again in Domlesch with an almost grown-up boy and tried to find a home for him with relations, but every door was closed against him. That so embittered him that he vowed he would never again set foot in Domlesch and came with the boy to Dorfli to live. It seems he still had a little money left, enough for the boy, Tobias, to be apprenticed to a carpenter. He was a good boy and well liked by everyone in Dorfli. But nobody trusted the old man. There was a rumour that he had to get out of Naples to avoid serious trouble because it was said that he had killed a man. Of course, not in the war, you understand, but in some brawl. But we did not break our connection with him, since we were closely related. We called him Uncle, and as we are related on my father's side to almost everybody in Dorfli, the whole village called him Uncle too. And because he lived on the Alm, he was called the Alm Uncle. "But what happened to Tobias?" asked Barbel eagerly. "Well, Tobias served his apprenticeship in Mel's, and as soon as he finished, he came home to Dorfli and married my sister Adelaide. They were very happy together, but their happiness was short-lived. 2 years later, while Tobias was working at the building of a house, a beam fell on him and killed him, and when his mutilated body was brought home, Adelaide fell into a violent fever as a result of the shock and never recovered. In any case, she was not very strong and sometimes took strange fits when we couldn't tell whether she was asleep or awake. Only a few weeks after Tobias died, Adelaide too was buried. Some said it was the uncle's punishment for the wicked life he had led, and they even told him so to his face. The pastor too begged him to repent of his past sins, but the uncle only grew more fierce and embittered. Then we heard he had come to live on the Alm, and he was remained up there in solitude ever since, at war with God and the world. Mother and I took in Adelaide's little child. She was only a year old then. When Mother died last summer and I had to go work at the health resort, I took the child with me, and left her in charge of old Ursel up in Pfaffersordorf. I was kept on at the health resort during the winter, and early in the spring some Frankfurt people I had served during the summer came back. They offered me a job, and I am going away with them to Frankfurt. We leave the day after tomorrow. And you are going to leave the poor child with that terrible old man, said Barbel reproachfully. Well, what else can I do? Replied Data defensively. I can't take her with me, but goodness, where are you going, Barbel? We are already halfway up the Alm. I have almost come as far as I need, answered Barbel. I want to speak to Peter's grandmother. She spins for me in winter. Goodbye then, Data, and good luck. Data shook her friend's hand and stopped while Barbel walked towards the little brown Alm Hut, which was situated in a sheltered spot some yards off the path. The hut was more than halfway up the Alm from the village. It was fortunate it stood in such a sheltered place, for it looked dilapidated beyond repair. Even situated as it was hardly safe to live in when gales swept the mountains. Then everything in the hut, doors and windows, and all the old beams would shake and crack. The goat herd lived here with his mother and his old blind grandmother. Peter was 11 years old. Every morning he collected goats from the village and drove them up to the Alm, where they grazed till evening. Data stood looking impatiently in all directions to catch a glimpse of the children and the goats. But they had taken a very roundabout way. At first the little girl had toiled hard to climb with the goat herd, panting in the heat and making a great effort under her heavy encumbrance of clothes. She did not say a word, but looked steadily now at Peter, who jumped about on his bare feet, now at the goats who climbed still more easily on their slender little legs. Suddenly the child sat down on the ground and quickly removed her shoes and stockings. Then standing up, she began to take off her many layers of clothing until clad only in her little light petticoat. She stood with her little bare arms stretched happily into the air. Then she put everything neatly into a little pile and jumped and climbed behind the goats. As she came skipping along in her new garb, Peter grinned broadly. He looked back, and when he saw the little pile of clothes lying on the path, he grinned even more, but he said nothing. The child, feeling free at last, began to chatter to the boy, asking him how many goats he had, where he was going with them, and what he would do there. So at last the children arrived at the cottage and caught sight of Aunt Data. She no sooner spotted the group when she cried, "Heidi, what a sight you are! Where are your clothes? And the new shoes I bought you, and the stockings I knitted? Where have you put them?" The child quietly pointed down the hill. The aunt followed the direction of her finger. There was indeed something lying on the ground. "You dreadful child," she cried in great annoyance. "What's the meaning of this? Why have you taken everything off?" "I didn't need them," said the child, not looking at all penitent. "Oh, have you no sense?" lamented the aunt. "Who is to go back down for them?" Then turning to Peter, she ordered, "Peter, run back and fetch the clothes." "I am late already," said Peter slowly, and remained motionless, both hands in his pockets. "Don't just stand there staring," Aunt Data cried. "That will never do. Come here, I will give you something good. Look." And she held up a bright new coin. The boy's eyes shone at the sight of it. Suddenly he jumped up and made off down the Alm by the shortest way. Soon he reached the little pile of clothes, gathered them up, and sped back so quickly that the aunt could not but be pleased, and at once gave him the coin. Peter put it in his pocket, his face wreathed in smiles. "You can take the clothes up to the uncle's, since you were going that way," Aunt Data said as she started to climb the steep slope which rose just behind Goat Peter's cottage. Readily Peter carried out the order and followed as she walked ahead, his left arm round the bundle, the goat's stick swinging in his right hand. Heidi and the goats leaped joyously at his side. Thus, in 3/4 of an hour, the little group reached the top of the Alm, where the old uncle's cottage stood on a ledge of the mountain. Along the side of the cottage, facing the valley, the uncle had made himself a bench, and here he now sat, puffing his pipe, both hands on his knees, calmly watching the children, the goats, and Aunt Data as they climbed. Heidi arrived first. She went straight up to the old man, stretched out her hand towards him, and said, "Good evening, grandfather." "Well, well, what is the meaning of this?" asked the old man gruffly. He took the child's hand abruptly, and as he did so a long, piercing glance shot from beneath his bushy eyebrows. Heidi returned his look without blinking. In the meantime, the aunt and Peter had arrived. "I wish you good day," said Data shortly. "This is Tobias and Adelaide's child. You will hardly recognise her, because you have not seen her since she was a year old." "What have I to do with the child?" asked the old man brusquely. "And you there," he called to Peter. "Take yourself off with your goats. You are late as it is." Peter obeyed at once, for the uncle had given him an angry look, which did not make him wish to linger. "The child just has to stay with you, uncle," said Data. "I have done my bit for 4 years. Now it is your turn." "Indeed," mumbled the old man, his glance flashing at Data. "And if the child starts fretting for you, what shall I do with her then?" "That's up to you," replied Data. "No one told me what to do with a little one when she was left in my care, and only 1 year old too. Now I have to make my own living, and you are the child's nearest relative. If you can't look after her, it's your responsibility, and you must answer for any harm that comes to her. And I shouldn't think you can afford to add another to your list of wicked deeds." At her last words, the old man got up. He looked so threatening that she took a step backwards. Flinging out his arm, he shouted at her, "Be off, and don't be in a hurry to show your face here again." Data did not need a second telling. "Goodbye then," she said hurriedly. "And you too, Heidi." And with that she turned and ran all the way back to Dorfley. This time people were even more eager to stop and question her, wondering what had become of the child. They all knew Data well, and also the history of the child. When voices called from every door and window, "Where is the child, Data? What have you done with her?" she replied angrily, "With the Alm Uncle, of course. I left her with the Alm Uncle, just as I said." Data ran through the village as fast as she could go, Her one thought was to get away from Dorfley and to avoid speaking to anyone, for she was far from easy in her conscience about what she had done. Chapter 2: The Grandfather's Hut. Long after Data had gone, the grandfather sat silently, blowing clouds of smoke from his pipe, while Heidi began to inspect her new surroundings. She peeped into the goat house and then walked round to the other side of the cottage, where there stood 3 old fir trees. A strong wind shook their thick branches, and the child stood still, listening to the moaning of the wind in the ancient trees. Then she completed the circuit of the cottage and returned to where the grandfather sat. She went across and stood in front of him, her hands clasped behind her back, her steady eyes looking at him. The old man raised his head. "Well, what are we going to do now? I would like to see inside the cottage." "Come then," the grandfather got up, "and bring your bundle of clothes." "I don't need them any more," declared Heidi. The old man turned and looked searchingly at the child. "She doesn't lack sense anyway," he said quietly to himself. "Then why don't you need them any more?" he asked aloud. "I would rather be dressed like the goats with their bare legs." "All right then, but bring the things," commanded the grandfather. "We will put them in the cupboard." Heidi obediently picked up her bundle and followed the old man inside. The door opened directly onto a big room, which was the full breadth of the cottage. The only furniture in the room was a table and a chair. In one corner stood the grandfather's bed, and in the opposite wall was the fireplace, above which hung a big kettle. On the same side as the bed, in the middle of the wall, there was a door which the grandfather now opened. This was the cupboard where he kept his belongings. On a shelf lay a couple of shirts, socks, and some rough sackcloth sheets. On another stood plates, cups, and glasses, and on the top shelf there was a round loaf, a sausage, ham, and cheese. As soon as the door was opened, Heidi came forward and pushed her own clothes as far behind the grandfather's as possible, so that they would be well out of the way. Then she turned her attention to the room and asked, "Where shall I sleep, grandfather?" "Wherever you want to." This seemed to please the child, and she began to inspect every corner. By the grandfather's bed, wooden steps went up, and when the child climbed the little ladder, she found herself in the hayloft. A bale of hay, fresh and sweet smelling, lay on the floor, and from a little window in the roof she could see far down into the valley. "Oh, this is where I want to sleep," she cried joyfully. "It is lovely. Come and see how lovely it is, grandfather." "I have seen it before," came from below. "I'm going to make my bed." The child called again and ran busily to and fro. "You must bring me a sheet, grandfather." "Indeed," remarked the grandfather, and after a while he went to the cupboard and raked out amongst the clothes. Presently he pulled out a long coarse piece of sackcloth, which might serve as a sheet. He carried it up to the loft, and there he saw that a very nice little bed had been made amongst the hay, with extra hay piled up into a pillow at one end, and arranged in such a way that whoever lay on the improvised bed would be able to look up at the little window. "Well done," exclaimed the grandfather. "Now the sheet goes on. But wait." And here he took a big bunch of hay and made the bed twice as thick so that the hardness of the floor would not come through. "Now bring it here." Heidi quickly grasped the sheet, but it was so thick and heavy she staggered under the weight. Together they spread the sheet, and now the bed looked very trim and tidy. But Heidi stood back and regarded it critically. "There is still something we have forgotten, grandfather." "Now what?" he asked. "A top sheet." "Oh, indeed. But what if I haven't got any?" "Don't worry, grandfather," Heidi consoled him. "We can use more hay for a cover." And she began to gather another bundle. Wait a moment. The old man went down to the steps to his own bed. Back he came presently with a big heavy linen sack, which he laid on the floor. "Isn't that better than hay?" he asked, helping her to spread it on the bed. Heidi stood admiringly before her new sleeping place. "The cover is beautiful," she declared ecstatically, "and the bed is just perfect. I wish it were night time already so that I could go to sleep on it." "I think we should eat first," the grandfather advised. In her eagerness, Heidi had forgotten everything except the new bed. But now when she thought of it, she did indeed feel very hungry, for she had had nothing to eat since morning. "Yes, I think so too," she agreed. "Well, then since we are in such complete agreement, let's go down," said the old man, guiding the child towards the stairs. In the room below, he went over to the fireplace, pushed back the big kettle, and brought a little one forward on the chain. Then he sat down on a 3-legged stool and blew up the fire. It was soon blazing merrily, and the little kettle began to boil. Next, the old man cut a big piece of cheese, and piercing it with a long iron fork, he held it over the fire, turning it constantly to and fro until it was golden brown all over. Heidi had watched all these operations with the closest attention, and apparently some new ideas had entered her head, for suddenly she jumped up and went to the cupboard. When the grandfather had decided that the cheese was nicely toasted and took it to the table, there was the round loaf, 2 plates and 2 knives, neatly laid, for Heidi had been quick to see what was wanted and had brought everything from the cupboard. "So you can think for yourself, that's good," said the grandfather, and spread the toasted cheese on the bread. "But there is still something missing." Heidi's eyes alighted on the steaming pot by the fire, and she knew at once what it was. Quickly she ran back to the cupboard, but could find only one little bowl. She hesitated only a moment, for right at the back were 2 glasses. Presently she came back and put the little bowl and a glass on the table. very good," said the old man. "You have found a way out of the difficulty. But now, where are you going to sit?" And he drew his own chair up to the table. Heidi ran to the hearth and brought back the little 3-legged stool. "You have got a seat at any rate," said the grandfather, "though it is rather low. Even on my chair you would be too small to reach the table. But now you must eat. Come along." He filled the little bowl with milk, and placing it on his own chair, pushed it near the stool so that Heidi had a little table of her own. Then he filled a plate with a big piece of bread and some of the yellow toasted cheese, and laid it also on the chair. He himself sat on the corner of the table and began his meal. Heidi lifted her little bowl and drank without stopping. "Do you like the milk?" the grandfather asked. "It is the best milk I have ever tasted," replied Heidi. "You can have more," said the grandfather, filling the little bowl again and putting it before her. The cheese was soft as butter and tasted good. From time to time Heidi took a drink from the bowl and looked blissfully happy. When the meal was finished, the grandfather went out to the goat house, where there was work to be done. Heidi watched him attentively, observing how he first swept everything clean with the broom and then spread fresh straw for the little animals to sleep on. At last the goat house was finished, and he went into the shed which was close by. Here he chopped several round sticks to equal lengths. Then he carefully shaped a flat piece of wood and drilled 4 holes into one side. He put the round sticks into the holes, and there was a chair like the grandfather's, only much higher. Speechless with admiration, Heidi gazed at it. "What do you think it is, Heidi?" asked the grandfather. "It is my chair because it is so high." "She has eyes in her head all right," thought the grandfather as he walked round the cottage, fixing a loose board at the door and repairing anything that needed attention. Heidi followed close behind. Nothing escaped her notice. Evening came, and the old fir trees behind the cottage began to rustle more loudly as a strong wind swept along, roaring amongst the branches. Heidi's heart beat faster. She thought she had never heard anything so beautiful, and went skipping and running for sheer joy under the trees. All the while the grandfather watched the child from the doorway. There was the sound of a shrill whistle. Heidi stood still, and the grandfather stepped out of the cottage. From above the goats came jumping like wild creatures, and in the midst of them was Peter. With a joyful cry, Heidi rushed to welcome her old friends of the morning. At the cottage, children and animals came to a halt, and 2 pretty slender goats, one brown, one white, ran from the herd towards the grandfather. Eagerly they licked his hands, for in the palms he held a little salt, which the goats liked very much. Peter disappeared with the rest of the flock, and Heidi fell to caressing first one and then the other of the goats, and jumped gaily round them. "Do they belong to us, grandfather? Do they really belong to us?" she asked. "Will they stay in the little shed? Do they always stay with us?" Heidi scarcely gave the grandfather a chance to put in his steady "yes, yes" between one question and the next. When the goats had finished licking the salt from his hands, the old man commanded, "Go fetch your little bowl and the bread." Heidi obeyed at once. Then the grandfather milked the white goat into the little bowl, which was soon full to the brim. He cut a piece of bread and, handing it to the child, said, "Eat now and go upstairs to sleep. I suppose your night things are in the bundle Aunt Data made up. Get it out if you need it. I have to tie up the goats for the night. Sleep well." "Good night, grandfather. But what are the goats' names? Tell me, grandfather," cried the child, running behind the old man's receding figure. "The white one is called Little Swan, and the brown one is Little Bear," the grandfather called over his shoulder. "Good night, little swan. Good night, little bear," cried Heidi happily as all three disappeared into the goat house. Heidi went back to the bench outside the cottage, where she sat and took her bread and milk. The wind was so strong she was almost blown from her seat, so she finished hurriedly and went into the house and upstairs to bed, where she was soon fast asleep, as soundly and happily as though on the best feather bed. Not long after, and before the darkness had come completely, the grandfather too had gone to bed, for he always rose at sunrise. All night long the wind blew strongly, so that the whole cottage seemed to shake and every beam cracked and groaned. In the middle of the night, the grandfather rose, saying half aloud to himself, "Perhaps she is afraid." He climbed the steps and stood by Heidi's bed. At intervals the moon shone brightly, then as clouds were chased across it, everything became dark again. At that moment, a shaft of moonlight came through the little window, falling directly on Heidi's bed. Her cheeks were flushed from sleep, and her head rested quietly and peacefully on her little round arms. Her dreams appeared to be happy ones, for a smile played about her mouth. The grandfather gazed at the sleeping child until the moon was again overshadowed. Then he turned away in the darkness and went to his bed. Chapter 3. On the Alm. Early in the morning, Heidi was awakened by a loud whistle. As she opened her eyes, a gleam of sunshine came through the little window onto her bed and shone on the hay nearby, so that everything was bathed in golden light. Heidi looked puzzled and tried to think where she was. Then from outside she heard the grandfather's deep, quiet voice, and she remembered that she was up on the Alm. She no longer lived with old Ursel, who was almost stone deaf and always wanted to have Heidi by her side, so that sometimes the child had felt like a prisoner and would have liked to run away. So she was very glad when she awoke and found herself in her new home. She remembered all the exciting things she had seen the previous day and wondered what this new day had in store for her. Above all, she looked forward to seeing Little Swan and Little Bear again. Quickly she jumped out of bed and in a few minutes had dressed herself. Then she climbed down the steps and ran out to the front of the cottage. Peter the goatherd was already there with his flock, and the grandfather was leading out Little Swan and Little Bear to join them. Heidi ran forward to say good morning to him and the goats. "How would you like to go with them to the pasture?" asked the grandfather. Heidi was overjoyed. That was the thing she would like best of all. "But first you must wash yourself, or the sun shining brightly up there will laugh at you when he looks down and sees how dirty you are. This is where you wash." The grandfather pointed towards a big flat tub filled with water, which stood in the sun before the cottage door. Heidi jumped towards it and splashed and scrubbed until she was perfectly clean. In the meantime, the grandfather went into the cottage, calling to Peter, "Come here, Goat General, and bring your rucksack." Amazed Peter answered the call and laid down the rucksack in which he carried his meagre lunch. "Open it," ordered the old man, and then put in a big piece of bread and an equally big piece of cheese. Peter opened his round eyes very wide, for this food was twice as much as he had for his own lunch. "And now the little bowl has to go in too," the old man continued. "At lunchtime you will milk for her 2 little bowlfuls, for she is going too, and can stay with you until you come back in the evening. Take care she doesn't fall over the precipice." Now Heidi came running towards them. "Grandfather, the sun can't laugh at me now." For fear of the sun's mockery, she had rubbed her face, neck and arms so vigorously with the rough cloth which the grandfather had hung beside the water tub that she was almost as red as a lobster. The old man smiled. "No, he has no reason to laugh now," he agreed. "But do you know what happens when you come home in the evening? You go right into the tub like a fish, because if you run like the goats, your feet will get dirty. Now off you go." Happily the children climbed up the arm. The high winds during the night had blown away the last little cloud, and now the sky was a vast expanse of deep blue, out of which the sun shone and glittered on the green slopes. The little blue and yellow mountain flowers opened their cups and seemed to nod merrily at Heidi, who romped everywhere. Enchanted by this sparkling, waving sea of flowers, she forgot all about Peter, even about the goats. All along the way she picked flowers until she had a big bunch which she wrapped in her pinafore, for she wanted to take them home. Peter was quite dazed, trying to look in every direction at once, for the goats, like Heidi, were jumping from one place to another. He had to whistle and shout and brandish his stick to bring the goats together again. "Where are you now, Heidi?" came the boy's exasperated and rather angry cry. "Here," came the reply, but Peter could see no one. Heidi was sitting, hidden from view, behind a little hillock. "Come here," Peter called again. "You are not to go near the precipice. The uncle said so." "Where is that?" asked Heidi, still not moving from her hiding place. "Up there, right on the top, the old eagle sits on the lookout for his prey." That did the trick. At once Heidi jumped up and ran to Peter with her apron full of flowers. "That is enough flower picking for now," he said as they climbed up together. "If you are going to keep pace with me, and if you pick all the flowers today, there will be none left for tomorrow." Heidi was convinced. Moreover, her pinafore was so full it could hardly hold another one, so she now walked quietly beside Peter. The pasture which Peter usually chose and where he spent the day was situated at the foot of the high rocks. Bushes and fir trees covered the lower parts, but nearer the summit the rocks rose rugged and bare towards the sky. On one side of the mountain, jagged clefts stretched far down, and the grandfather had been right to warn Peter of the danger. When they had reached the pasture, Peter carefully put his rucksack into a little hollow in the ground, for the wind often blew with great violence across this part of the country, and Peter did not want to see his precious possessions rolling down the mountainside. Then the boy, tired after the strenuous climb, stretched himself out at full length on the sunny pasture. Heidi by this time had undone her pinafore and rolled it neatly round the flowers, which she laid beside Peter's rucksack in the hollow. Then she sat down beside him and looked around. The valley lay far below, bathed in the sparkling morning sunshine. In front of Heidi, a big broad snowfield rose up to the dark blue sky, and on the left stood a huge pile of rocks, above which a bare rocky peak reached towards the sky, towering majestically above the child. Heidi sat motionless. A great silence was all around, and only the delicate blue harebells and yellow cistus swayed softly in the gentle breeze, nodding joyfully on their slender little stems. Peter had fallen asleep, and the goats were climbing high up amongst the bushes. Heidi had never been so happy. The golden sunlight, the fresh breezes, and the delicate perfume of the flowers filled her with delight, and she only wished that she might stay there forever. She gazed so long at the mountains that it seemed to her that each had a face, and that these mountain faces were as familiar to her as old friends. Suddenly Heidi heard a loud, harsh cry, and when she looked up, she saw circling overhead a huge bird, larger than she had ever seen before. His large wings were outspread, and he flew in a wide circle, coming back again and again, and uttering loud piercing shrieks above Heidi's head. "Peter, Peter, wake up!" cried Heidi. "Look, there is a big bird just above us." Peter got up and watched the bird too, as it rose higher and higher, and at last disappeared behind the grey rocks. "Where has he gone to?" asked Heidi, who had been watching the bird with keen interest. "Home to his nest," replied Peter. "Is he home up there? Oh, how nice to live so high up. How terribly he cries. Let's climb up there and see where his nest is." "Oh no," replied Peter emphatically. "Even the goats can't climb so high. And the uncle said you were not to climb the rocks." Suddenly Peter started to whistle and call loudly. Heidi could not think what this meant, but the goats apparently understood, for one after another they came springing down until they were all gathered together on the green slope. Some continued to nibble, and others ran about, playfully pushing each other with their horns. Heidi jumped up and ran amongst them. While she played with the goats, Peter fetched the rucksack and laid out the 4 pieces of bread on the ground, the big ones on Heidi's side and the small ones on his own. Then he took the little bowl, drew some milk into it from a little swan, and placed it in the centre. "Stop skipping now, it is time to eat," he said. Heidi sat down. "Is the milk for me?" she asked. "Yes," replied Peter, "and the 2 big pieces of bread and cheese are yours too, and when you have finished you get another bowlful from a little swan." Heidi began to drink her milk, and as soon as she put down her empty bowl, Peter filled it again. Then Heidi gave a big piece of her bread to Peter, and all the cheese as well, saying, "You can have it all, I have had enough." Peter gazed at her speechless with surprise. Never in his life could he have given away as much as that. He hesitated a little, for he could not believe that Heidi meant it seriously. She held out the pieces, but as Peter still did not take them, she laid the food on his knees. Peter had never before had such a satisfying lunch. The animals had begun to climb up again towards the bushes, some skipping gaily over everything, others stopping to taste the tender herbs. "Peter," Heidi said presently. "The prettiest of all are Little Swan and Little Bear." "I know," Peter replied. "The uncle brushes and washes them and gives them salt, and he has the nicest shed." Suddenly Peter jumped up and bounded after the goats. Heidi followed. Something must have happened, and she simply could not stay behind. Peter forced his way through the middle of the herd to that side of the Alm, where the bare and jagged rocks fell away steeply. Here a heedless little goat might easily tumble down and break his legs. Peter had noticed inquisitive little goldfinch jumping in that direction. The boy arrived just in time, for the little goat was just about to jump towards the edge of the precipice. Peter, lunging towards the goat, fell down and only managed to seize one of its legs as he fell. Goldfinch gave an angry cry at finding herself caught and tried desperately to free herself. Peter could not get up and shouted for Heidi to help because he was afraid Goldfinch might wrench her leg. Heidi was already there and at once saw the danger. She quickly gathered some sweet-smelling plants from the ground and held them out towards Goldfinch, saying coaxingly, "Come along, Goldfinch, and be good. Look, you might fall down and hurt yourself." The little goat turned quickly and ate the herbs from Heidi's outstretched hand. In the meantime, Peter got to his feet again and held Goldfinch by the cord with which her little bell was fastened to her neck. Heidi grasped the goat in the same way at the other side of its head, and together they led the truant back to the peacefully grazing flock. As soon as Peter got her back to safety, he raised his stick and started to give her a good beating. Goldfinch, however, knowing what was in store, timidly shrank back, and Heidi cried, "No, Peter, no, you mustn't beat her. Look how frightened she is." "She deserves it," Peter muttered, about to strike, but Heidi threw herself against his arm, crying indignantly, "Don't touch her, you will hurt her. Leave her alone." Peter turned surprised eyes on the fierce little girl, and his stick dropped to his side. "All right then, I'll let her off, if you give me some of your cheese tomorrow again," he bargained. "You can have it all, tomorrow and every day. I don't want it," Heidi consented, "and I'll give you the bread too, the same as today, but you must promise never to beat Goldfinch, or Snowflake, or any of the goats." "Suits me," said Peter, and that was as good as a promise. He let Goldfinch go, and the little goat leapt joyously towards the herd. So the day passed quickly, and the sun began to sink behind the mountains. Heidi was sitting quietly on the ground, gazing at the cistus and the harebells, which glistened in the evening sunshine. Rocks and grass shimmered in a golden glow. Suddenly she jumped up and cried, "Peter, Peter, they are on fire! They are all on fire. All the mountains are burning, and the great snow mountain also, and the sky. Oh, look at the lovely fiery snow. Peter, get up and look. The fire is at the great bird's nest too. Look at the rocks and the fir trees. Everything is on fire. It is always like that, replied Peter with great unconcern, continuing to peel his stick. But it is not real fire. What is it then? Asked Heidi, gazing eagerly around. What is it, Peter? It just gets like that, Peter tried to explain. Oh, look, look, Peter, cried Heidi, again in great excitement. Everything is turning a rosy pink colour. Look at the snow and the high rocks. What are their names, Peter? Mountains don't have names, replied Peter. Oh, how beautiful crimson snow. Oh, now all the rocks are turning grey. Now the colour is all gone. Now it is all over, Peter. Heidi sat down, looking as distressed as if everything really had come to an end. Tomorrow it will be the same, said Peter. Get up now, we must go home. Will it be like this every day we are on the pasture? Asked Heidi insistently as she walked down the Alm at Peter's side. Mostly, he replied. Heidi was very happy. She had absorbed so many new impressions, had so many new things to think about, that she was quite silent until they reached the hut and saw the grandfather sitting on the bench under the fir trees. Here he sat in the evenings, waiting for his goats. Heidi ran up to him, followed by Little Swan and Little Bear, for the goats knew their master. Good night, Peter called after Heidi, and then added, Come again tomorrow, because he was very anxious for her to go with him. Heidi raced towards the old man. Oh, grandfather, it was wonderful, she cried long before she reached him. The fire on the snow, and the rocks and the blue and yellow flowers, and look what I have brought for you. Heidi unfolded her pinafore, and all the flowers fell at her grandfather's feet. But what a sight the poor flowers were! Heidi did not recognise them. They were like withered grass, and not a single little cup was open. Grandfather, what is the matter with the flowers? Cried Heidi, quite alarmed. They weren't like that before. What is wrong with them? They would rather be out in the sun than tied up in a pinafore, explained the grandfather. Then I will never gather any more. But grandfather, why did the eagle screech so? Heidi asked. You had better have your bath now, said the grandfather, and I shall fetch some milk from the shed. Afterwards, when we are having supper, you can tell me about everything. Later, when Heidi sat in her high chair, the little bowl of milk in front of her and the grandfather at her side, she again asked her question. Why did the bird scream at us, grandfather? He screams in mockery of the people in the villages down in the valley, where they sit gossiping together. He wants to say, if you would all mind your own business or climb up into the heights like me, you would be much happier. The grandfather spoke these words with such vehemence that Heidi seemed to hear again the croaking of the great bird. Why don't the mountains have names, grandfather? Asked Heidi again. They have names, he answered, and if you can describe one to me so that I can recognize it, then I will tell you its name. Heidi tried to describe the rocky mountain with the two high peaks exactly as she had seen it. Presently the grandfather interrupted. "Yes, I know that one. Its name is Falkness. Did you notice any others?" Then Heidi recalled the mountain with the large snowfield, which looked at first as if it were on fire, and then turned rose-coloured, then pale pink, and at last faded back to its own grey colour. "I know that one too," said the grandfather. "That is the Shizaplana. Did you like being on the pasture?" Now Heidi told him everything, how wonderful it had been, and particularly about the fire in the evening. Heidi wanted the grandfather to explain why this had happened, since Peter had been unable to do so. "You see," the grandfather instructed her, "that's what the sun does when he says goodnight to the mountains. He throws his most beautiful rays over them, so that they won't forget him before morning." Heidi was delighted. She could hardly wait for the next day, when she would again be allowed to go to the pasture, to watch how the sun said goodnight to the mountains. But first she had to go to bed, and how soundly she slept all night on her hay bed, and dreamt of nothing but glistening mountains tinged with red, and little snowflake running happily about. Chapter 4. Peter's Grandmother. Next morning, the sun shone brightly as Peter appeared with the goats, and they all went up together to the pasture, and so it continued every day. Heidi grew stronger and sturdier with living so much in the open, and her little sunburnt face shone with health. When autumn came and the wind blew with greater force over the mountains, the grandfather would sometimes say, "Today you had better stay at home, Heidi. A little one like you might easily be swept down the mountainside by the wind." But when Peter heard this in the morning, he would look very miserable. He found it dull now without Heidi, and of course he got less to eat. On such days, the goats would become so stubborn that he had twice as much trouble with them. They too had grown so accustomed to Heidi that they would hardly move off without her. Heidi herself was never bored, because she always saw something new and exciting to take up her attention. Best of all, she liked to go up to the Alm with the goats, but she also liked to watch the grandfather at work, helping him all she could at the carpenter's bench. Then a very special treat for Heidi was to watch the grandfather prepare the lovely round goat's milk cheese. But even in the midst of such exciting activities, she would sometimes steal away when the wind blew strongest, to stand and listen beneath the old fir trees, catching her breath as the wind roared amongst the branches. As the season changed, the sun lost the fierce heat of summer, and Heidi looked at her warm stockings and shoes and her wool dress. Gradually the weather grew colder, and Peter would appear early in the morning, blowing on his hands to warm them. Then one morning they awoke to find the whole Alm covered in snow. Not one blade of grass was visible. Peter and the goats did not appear, and Heidi watched from the window of the hut as the big snowflakes fell. The snow fell thickly until it reached above the window, so that it was impossible to open it, and Heidi and the Alm Uncle were imprisoned in the hut. This amused Heidi, and she ran from one window to another, expecting the hut to be covered right over at any moment. The next day, it had stopped snowing, and the grandfather forced his way out and shoveled the snow away from around the hut. Soon the snow was heaped up around the cottage, and they were able to open the window again. In the afternoon, as Heidi and the grandfather sat together by the fire, there came a great thumping outside the door. At last the door opened, and there stood Peter, knocking the snow from his boots. "Good evening," he said, coming in and at once getting as near as possible to the fire. After this salutation, the boy lapsed into silence, but his whole face beamed with joy. Heidi looked at him in amazement, for the snow which had covered him from head to foot was beginning to melt and ran from him in rivulets. "Well, General, and how are things going?" called the grandfather. "Now that the goat army has been disbanded, you will have to turn to nibbling at the slate pencil." "Why must he nibble the slate pencil?" asked Heidi at once. "In winter the boy has to go to school," explained the grandfather. "There he learns to read and write, and that is sometimes difficult. And then it helps a little if one can nibble the slate pencil. Isn't that so, General?" "Yes, that's true," acknowledged Peter. Now Heidi's interest was thoroughly aroused. She asked Peter many questions about school and everything to be seen and heard there. Since conversation with Peter was inclined to be a slow business, he had ample opportunity to get thoroughly dry. He always had great difficulty in putting his thoughts into words, and on the subject of school, this was particularly hard. By the time he had managed to think of the answer to one question, Heidi had already thought of 2 or 3 more to ask, and they were all of a kind which required much answering. The grandfather kept silent during this dialogue, but an occasional twitch of amusement at the corners of his mouth showed that he was listening. "Well, General, now you have been under fire and must be in need of some refreshment." As he spoke, the old man rose and got the supper from the cupboard, and Heidi brought the chairs up to the table. Peter's round eyes opened wider when he saw what a large piece of delicious meat the grandfather put on his plate. He had not enjoyed himself so much for a long time. As they finished the meal, it began to grow dark, and Peter prepared to go home. He had already bid them good night, but turned again at the door and said, "I'll come back again on Sunday, a week today, but the grandmother said she would like you to come to see her sometime." This new idea of going to visit somebody appealed to Heidi at once, and on the following morning her first words were, "Grandfather, I must go down and see the grandmother today. She will be expecting me." "The snow is too deep," replied the grandfather, to put her off. But Heidi was determined to go since she had got the grandmother's message. Not a day passed without her pleading, "Grandfather, I must go now. The grandmother is waiting for me." On the 4th day a hard frost had set in, and the ground crackled at every step. But the bright sun peeped in at the window and fell on Heidi where she sat on her high chair at the table. Soon she had begun her customary little speech. "Today I must go to the grandmother, or she will be tired of waiting for me." The grandfather rose, and going up to the hayloft, brought down the thick sack which was Heidi's bed cover. "Come then," he said. Joyously the child skipped out into the glittering snow world. The old fir trees were silent now, and on every branch the snow lay thickly. The grandfather went into the shed and brought out a large sleigh. There was a pole fixed at the side, and from the low seat the sleigh could be guided by the feet pressing against the ground and with the help of the pole. The grandfather took his seat on the sleigh and placed the child on his knee, wrapping her carefully in the sack to keep her warm. His left arm held her secure, and this was necessary for the long drive ahead. Then he grasped the pole with his right hand and gave a push with his feet. The sleigh shot down the Alm with such rapidity that Heidi felt she was flying through the air like a bird. She shouted aloud with joy. By and by, the sleigh stopped with a jerk just outside Goat Peter's cottage. The grandfather lifted the child and unwrapped her, saying, "Now you go, and when it starts to get dark, come straight home." Then he turned and pulled the sleigh back up the mountain. Heidi opened the cottage door and found herself in a small, rather dark room. She could see a fireplace and a shelf with some dishes, so she concluded that this was the kitchen. Then she saw a door, and she found that it led into another narrower room. This cottage was quite different from her grandfather's, and everything looked very poor and shabby. When Heidi entered the room, she saw a table, and at the table a woman was sitting patching a jacket, which Heidi recognised at once as Peter's. In the corner, the old bent woman sat spinning. Heidi went straight to her. "Good day, grandmother," she said. "I am here to see you. Did you think I was long in coming?" The old woman lifted her head and groped for the hand which Heidi held out to her. When she had found it, she held it for a while thoughtfully. Then she said, "Are you the child who stays with the Alm Uncle? Are you Heidi?" "Yes," said Heidi. "I have just come down in the sleigh with grandfather." "How can it be? Your hands are quite warm. Brigitte, did the Alm Uncle himself come with the child?" Peter's mother, Brigitte, who had been mending at the table, got up and looked curiously at the little girl. "I don't know, mother," she said. "I suppose the child knows if the Alm Uncle came himself." Heidi looked at the woman and said firmly, "I know very well who wrapped me in the cover and brought me down in the sleigh. It was grandfather." "Then there must be something in what Peter said about the Alm Uncle, although we didn't believe him at the time," said the grandmother. "Who could believe it possible? I didn't think the child would stay up there more than 3 weeks. How does she look, Brigitte?" By this time, Brigitte had carefully inspected Heidi from every angle, so she was able to report, "She is as finely built as Adelaide was, but she has the dark eyes and curly hair of Tobias and the old man. I think she resembles both her parents." During this time, Heidi's attention had not been idle. She had looked round carefully at everything in the room. Suddenly she said, "Look, grandmother, one of your shutters is loose. The grandfather would put a nail in and then the shutter would be all right. It will break the window pane soon. See how it shakes." "Ah, my child," said the grandmother, "I can't see, but I can hear, and much more than the shutter banging. Everything in this house creaks and rattles as soon as the wind blows. It comes in from all sides. Everything seems to be loose. During the night, when the others are asleep, I often fear that the house is going to fall to pieces and kill us all. Alas, there is no one here to repair things. Peter doesn't know how to." "But can't you see the shutter banging, grandmother? Look, there it is, just over there," said Heidi, pointing towards the shutter. "Alas, child, I can see nothing, nothing," lamented the grandmother. "But if I go outside and open the shutter properly so that it is lighter, won't you see then, grandmother?" "No, not even then. Nobody can ever make it light for me." "But if you go outside into the white snow, then surely it will be light. Come with me, grandmother, and I will show you." Heidi, beginning to feel very distressed, took the old woman's hand and tried to lead her. "Just let me sit, child. It will always be dark for me." "But surely in summer it will be different, grandmother," comforted Heidi, becoming more and more anxious to help. "Surely then it will be light for you when the sun shines on the mountains and on the flowers and turns them all to crimson." "Ah, child, I shall never again see the flaming mountains, nor the little golden flowers up there. It will never again be light for me on this earth, never." Suddenly Heidi began to cry. Full of compassion, she sobbed. "Who then can help you? Is there no one?" The grandmother tried to comfort the child. The old woman was touched to hear her sob so bitterly. Heidi rarely cried, but when she did, her grief was not easily overcome. At last the grandmother said, "Come, my dear Heidi, come and I will explain something to you. You see, when one can't see, one likes to hear a kind word, and I like to hear you talking. Come sit here close to me and tell me what you have been doing up there and all about the grandfather. I knew him very well years ago, but for many years now I have only heard of him from Peter, and Peter doesn't talk much." Suddenly Heidi had a new idea. Quickly she wiped away her tears and said comfortingly, "You wait, grandmother, and I shall tell grandfather everything. He will make it light for you again and will repair the cottage for you. He can do everything." The grandmother was silent now, and Heidi began to give a lively account of her life, of summer days on the pasture, and her present life in winter with the grandfather. She described the things he could make from wood, benches and chairs, and beautiful mangers where the hay was put for little Swan and little Bear, and a big new tub for bathing in summer, a new milk bowl and a spoon. Heidi was quite carried away, describing all the beautiful things which could be made from pieces of wood. The grandmother listened intently, and every now and then she would say, "Do you hear, Brigitte? Do you hear what she says about the Alm Uncle?" Suddenly the story was interrupted by a loud clatter at the door, and in tramped Peter. He stopped abruptly and gaped when he saw Heidi, but managed a friendly grin as she greeted him "Good evening, Peter. Is the boy back from school already?" asked the grandmother in surprise. "An afternoon has not passed so quickly for me for a long time. How did you get on with your reading today?" "Just as usual," answered Peter. "Well, well," sighed the grandmother gently. "I thought there might perhaps be a change by this time, especially as you were going to be 12 years old in February." "What do you mean by change, grandmother?" Heidi asked with interest. "I hoped he would be able to learn to read," explained the grandmother. "Up there on the shelf is an old hymn book with beautiful hymns in it. I have not heard them for a very long time, and I can't remember them now, so I had hoped if Peter could learn to read, he would be able to read the hymns to me. But he can't learn the letters. It is too difficult for him." "I think I had better light the lamp. It is getting quite dark," said Peter's mother, who was still busy patching his jacket. "This afternoon has flown by without my noticing." Heidi jumped up from her chair, stretched out her hand quickly to the grandmother and said, "Goodbye, grandmother. I have to go home when it gets dark." She said goodnight to Peter and his mother and went towards the door. But the grandmother called anxiously, Wait, Heidi. You mustn't go alone. Peter will go with you. Do you hear? Take care of the child, Peter, and see that she doesn't fall down. And don't loiter on the way in case she catches cold. Do you hear? Has she got a warm scarf?" "I haven't got a scarf," replied Heidi, "but I shall not be cold." With these words, she was outside the house and away so quickly that Peter could hardly keep pace. "Run after her, Brigitte," the grandmother called. "The child will be frozen to death on such a night. Take my scarf. Run quickly." Brigitte obeyed. The children had only gone a little way up the mountain when they saw the grandfather coming down, and soon he stood beside them. "Good Heidi, you have kept your word," he praised her. Then wrapping her snugly in the cover, he picked her up and turned back up the mountain. Brigitte saw the old man lift the child, well wrapped up, into his arms. She returned with Peter to the cottage and told the grandmother with amusement what she had seen. The grandmother was both astonished and glad. God be thanked that he is good to the child. If only he would allow her to come again. She is a great comfort, and what a kind heart she has. Until the grandmother went to bed, she kept repeating, "If only she would come again, then I might have something to look forward to in this world." All the way, Heidi chatted to the grandfather, although he could not make out a word of the muffled voice coming from inside the sack. So he said, "Wait until we get home, then you can tell me all about it." As soon as they entered the hut, and Heidi was released from her wrapping, she said, "Grandfather, tomorrow we must take the hammer and plenty of long nails to fix the grandmother's shutters and all the loose boards, because her house rattles and shakes all over." "Must we indeed? And who told you so?" inquired the grandfather. "Nobody told me, but I know myself," replied Heidi. "For everything is loose, and if the grandmother cannot sleep, she is afraid that any minute the house will fall down on their heads. And for her everything is dark, and she thinks that nobody can ever make it light for her again. But you can do it, grandfather, I am sure. Think how sad it is for her. always having to sit in the dark and being frightened, and only you can help her. Tomorrow we'll go and help her, won't we, grandfather?" Heidi clung tightly to the grandfather and looked up at him with eagerness and confidence. For a little while the old man looked down at the child. Then he said, "Yes, Heidi, we will go and see about the repairs. We can do that tomorrow." The child started to skip round the room, chanting joyfully, "Tomorrow we'll go, tomorrow we'll go." The grandfather kept his promise, and on the following afternoon they took the same sleigh drive as they had done the previous day. Once again the old man set the child down before the door of Goat Peter's cottage and said, "Go in now, and come away again whenever it gets dark." Scarcely had Heidi opened the door and skipped into the room when the grandmother called from her corner, "It is Heidi, here comes the child." In her eagerness, she let the thread drop from her fingers, and the wheel stood still as both her arms stretched out towards the child. Heidi ran to her at once, and drawing the little chair close to her, she sat down at her side. Once again, there was so much she had to tell the grandmother, and so many questions she had to ask. But suddenly such heavy blows sounded against the wall that the grandmother started violently and nearly upset the spinning wheel. "Mercy on us!" she exclaimed, trembling. "What is that? The house must be falling about us." Heidi grasped her arm firmly and comforted her. "No, no, grandmother, don't be afraid. It is only grandfather hammering. He will fix everything so that you don't need to be afraid any more." "Is it possible? Then the Lord has not forgotten us," the grandmother exclaimed. "Did you hear that, Brigitte? If it is the Alm Uncle, go and tell him to come in so that I can thank him." Brigitte went outside. The Alm Uncle was busy nailing some strong planks to the wall, knocking in the nails with great vigour. Brigitte approached and said, "Good evening, Uncle. Mother and I want to thank you for your kindness, and she would like to tell you herself how grateful she is." "That will do," interrupted the old man. "I know what you think of the Alm Uncle. Go back inside. I can find out for myself what is needed here." Brigitte obeyed at once, for the uncle expressed himself in a way which brooked no opposition. He knocked and hammered his way all round the house, and then climbed the narrow little stair up to the roof, and hammered away there until he had used his last nail. By the time he had finished, darkness had fallen, and he had no sooner come down and got out the sleigh from behind the shed than Heidi appeared. As on the previous day, the grandfather wrapped her up and took her in his arms, and dragging the sleigh behind, made his way back up the mountain. And so the winter passed. After many lonely years, a great happiness had entered the joyless life of the old blind grandmother, and her days were no longer dreary and dark, for now she had something to look forward to. From early morning, she listened for Heidi's familiar tripping steps. The child became very attached to the old grandmother. As soon as she understood that nobody, not even the grandfather, could help the old woman, she was very sad. The old woman told her again and again that she felt the darkness much less when Heidi was with her. So every fine winter's day, Heidi came down on the sleigh. Without any fuss, the grandfather always packed in his tools, and he spent many afternoons repairing the cottage. All his good work soon had its effect, and the cottage no longer rattled and groaned when the wind blew round it. The grandmother said she had not slept so well for many a year, and that she would never forget what the Alm Uncle had done for her. Chapter 5. 2 visitors to the Alm Hut. Quickly the winter passed, and more quickly still the happy days of summer. And now another winter was drawing to its close. Heidi was happy as a bird, and each day she looked forward eagerly to the coming of spring, when the warm south wind would sweep through the fir trees and across the valley, melting the last patch of snow on the lower slopes. Long days on the pasture would return, and this seemed to Heidi the greatest joy of all. She was 8 years old now, and had learned a great deal during the time she had lived with the Alm Uncle. She knew how to manage the goats, and little Swan and little Bear would follow her about, bleating at the very sound of her voice. Twice during this winter, Peter had come from the school in Dorfley with a message from the teacher, telling the Alm Uncle that the child he had staying with him should go to school, since she was over the age and should indeed have attended the previous winter. On both occasions, the Alm Uncle had replied that he had no intention of sending the child to school. One sunny morning in March, as Heidi ran out of the house, she was startled to come face to face with an old gentleman dressed in black. He stood regarding her gravely for a time, and then, thinking that his unexpected appearance had frightened her, he said kindly, "It is all right, you need not be afraid of me. You are Heidi, are you not? Where is your grandfather?" "He is sitting at the table, making wooden spoons," replied Heidi, and at once led him inside. It was the old pastor from Dorfley, who had known the uncle well in the old days. He walked toward the old man, who was bent over his work, and addressed him. "Good morning, neighbour." Astonished, the grandfather looked up, then rose, saying, "Good morning, pastor." Offering his seat to the visitor, he added, "Pray, sit down." The pastor seated himself. "I have not seen you for a long time, neighbour," he said. "Nor I you." "I have come today to discuss something with you," continued the pastor. "I think perhaps you know what it is I want to talk to you about, and that I am anxious to hear what you intend to do about a certain matter." There was a silence. The pastor glanced quickly toward the child, who stood by the door and watched the newcomer with interest. "Heidi, go and see how the goats are getting along," said the grandfather. "You may take them a little salt and stay with them until I come." Heidi disappeared at once. "The child should have gone to school a year ago," said the pastor now. "The schoolmaster reminded you more than once, but you ignored him. What is it you intend should become of the child, neighbour?" "I intend that she should not go to school." The pastor looked with surprise at the old man, who sat on his bench with his arms folded determinedly. "But how is the child going to grow up?" asked the pastor reasonably. "She will grow up with the goats and birds. That way she will learn nothing evil." "But the child is neither a goat nor a bird, but a human being," pleaded the pastor. "Though she learns nothing evil from her companions, they cannot teach her ABC. Learn she must, and the time has come to begin. I came to speak a word to you in time, neighbour, so that you may think it over at your leisure and make arrangements during the summer. The child must not be allowed to run about another winter without taking lessons. Next winter, she must attend school regularly." "No, she will not go, pastor," muttered the old man with unwavering determination. "Do you really think there is no way of making you see reason if you insist so stubbornly on this decision?" asked the pastor, beginning to lose patience. "You have lived in the world and have seen and learned a lot. I should have thought you would have had more sense, neighbour." "You think so?" asked the old man, and the tremor in his voice betrayed that he was no longer calm. "And do you really think that next winter I shall send a delicate child on a 2 hours' walk down the mountain on ice-cold mornings in storm and snow, and allow her to return at night, when there may be a wind raging fit to blow a man over, let alone a child?" Perhaps the pastor still remembers the child's mother, Adelaide. She was a sleepwalker and had a delicate constitution. Might not the health of this child, who is also finely built, be endangered by so much exertion? I wonder who can force me to send her. I shall take it to the highest law court in the country, and then we shall see who can force me." "You are quite right, neighbour," agreed the pastor amicably. "It would not be possible to send the child from here, but I see the child is dear to you. For her sake, do what you ought to have done long ago. Come down into Dorfley and live amongst us. What a life you live here, alone and embittered toward God and men. If anything should happen to you up here in the mountains, who would come to your assistance? I cannot understand how you are not frozen to death in this hut of yours in the winter time. How does this delicate child stand up to it?" "I see to it she is not cold, and that she has a good warm bed. I should like the pastor to know. And another thing, I get all the wood I need. If the pastor cares to look into my woodshed, he will soon see there is plenty there. The fire is never out in my hut all through the winter. As for living down in the valley, it is out of the question. The people down there despise me, and I them. For all our sakes, it is better we stay apart." No, you were quite wrong," the pastor said warmly. "The people down below don't dislike you half as much as you think. Take my advice, neighbour. Make your peace with God. Ask his forgiveness, and then come and see how people will change towards you and how happy you will be." The pastor rose. He held out his hand to the old man and repeated with kindly emphasis, "I am counting on it, neighbour. Next winter you'll come back to live with us in the valley, and we'll be good neighbours again, as we used to be. I would be disappointed to think that you were coming back only because of the school business. Promise me that you will live amongst us again, reconciled to God and man." The Alm Uncle shook his hands with the pastor, but insisted firmly, "I know you mean well, but as to what you expect me to do, no, Once and for all, I tell you, I will not send the child, nor will I come down to live in the valley." "Then God help you," sighed the pastor, and sadly made his way down the mountain. As a result of the interview, the Alm Uncle was in a very black mood, and when Heidi asked in the afternoon, "Shall we go down to the grandmother's now?" he replied harshly, "Not today." He was silent the whole day, and the following morning when Heidi asked again, "Shall we go today to see the grandmother?" he turned away abruptly, mumbling, "Perhaps." But before the dinner dishes had been cleared away, another visitor had arrived. It was Aunt Data, dressed in a beautiful gown which swept the floor, and wearing on her head a very fine hat with feathers. The Alm Uncle examined her from head to foot in amazement, but Data was all prepared to make friendly conversation and at once adopted a flattering tone. "How well the child looks! I hardly recognised her. I can see that she has not had a bad time with the Alm Uncle. Far from it. I have often thought of taking the child back, for I can imagine that she is in your way. Day and night I have thought about what to do with her, and that's why I am here today. I have just heard of something that would be a piece of luck for Heidi. I have fixed everything. It is really a wonderful chance. The people I am in service with have some very wealthy relations. They live in the most beautiful house in Frankfurt, and they have an only daughter who is an invalid and has to be wheeled in a chair. She is very much alone and has her lessons with a private teacher, which of course is very boring for her. Now she would like a playmate, so her people have asked my mistress to help them find a companion. The lady housekeeper thinks that a simple, unspoiled child, one different from the children nowadays, would be most suitable. Naturally, I thought of Heidi and went at once to the lady and told her all about our child's character. She agreed immediately to take her. No one can foresee what good fortune will be in store for Heidi if the people become fond of her, and if something should happen to their own little daughter, and who knows when she is so weak, then in all likelihood they would not want to be without a child. Then it would be the most unheard of luck. "Do you think you have just about finished?" interrupted the Alm Uncle, who had held his peace up till now. "Well," exclaimed Data, tossing her head, "you behave as though I were telling you something of no consequence. Anybody would thank God if I were to bring such news." "You may take your news where you like. I want to hear no more of it," replied the uncle dryly. This threw Data immediately into a passion. "Well," she stormed, "if that is all you have to say, uncle, I will speak my mind too. The child is 8 years old now, but she knows nothing. You neither want her to attend school nor go to church. Oh, I have heard all about it in Dorfli. She is my sister's child, and I am responsible for what happens to her. When such a good chance comes her way, only one who cared nothing for her welfare would oppose it. But I tell you, I won't give in, and people are on my side. There is not a single person who would not take my part, and they are all against you. And if you are thinking of taking it to law, think well, uncle. There are things could be brought up against you which you wouldn't like to hear." "Hold your tongue," thundered the uncle, his eyes ablaze with anger. "Very well then, take the child away and ruin her, and never let me set eyes on you again, with that ridiculous hat on your head and such words on your tongue." Then the uncle turned from her abruptly and strode from the hut. "You have made grandfather angry," said Heidi, fixing dark, smouldering eyes on her aunt. "Oh, he'll soon get over it," replied Data impatiently. "Come along now. Where are your clothes?" "I won't go," said Heidi defiantly. "What did you say?" asked the aunt, about to fly into a temper. Then she softened her tone a little and continued more persuasively. "Come, come, you don't know any better. You have no idea how well off you will be." Then going to the wardrobe, she took out Heidi's things and parcelled them together. "Come now, here is your hat. What a sight it is! But never mind, it will do for today. Put it on quickly." "I'm going to stay here," repeated Heidi. "Don't be silly. You are as obstinate as a goat. I suppose that is what you have learned from them. But you've got to understand, the grandfather is cross and doesn't want to see us again. You heard him say so. He wants you to go with me, so now you mustn't make him more angry. You have no idea how nice it is in Frankfurt. But of course, if you don't like it, you can always come back here. By that time, the grandfather will have recovered himself." "Can I come straight home again if I want to?" asked Heidi. "Come along now and don't be silly. I said you can go home when you like. Today we are only going as far as Mainfeld, but tomorrow we will travel by train, and the train can carry you home again as fast as the wind." Aunt Data took the bundle of clothes under one arm, grasped Heidi firmly by the other hand, and together they started to climb down the hill. Peter had just come round the side of the cottage, carrying a huge bundle of thick hazel twigs, when the two figures approached. He stopped to stare at them as they passed by. Then he called out after them, "Where are you going?" "I have to go at once to Frankfurt with Aunt," answered Heidi, "but I'm going to say goodbye to the grandmother first. She will be waiting for me." "No, no," interrupted the aunt quickly. "It is much too late. You can see her next time you come back. Come along now." And she pulled the child along, afraid that she might again take it into her head to stay. Peter dashed into the cottage and dropped his bundle of sticks so noisily that the grandmother started up from her spinning, exclaiming fretfully, "What is it now? What is it?" And Peter's mother, who had been sitting by the table, said in her patient way, "What is it, Peter? What is the matter?" "She is taking Heidi away," gasped Peter. "Who?" asked the grandmother in distress. "Taking her where, Peter?" But she soon guessed what had taken place, for her daughter had told her not long ago that she had seen Data going up to the Alm Uncle's. The old woman unfastened the window with trembling fingers and called out imploringly, "Data, Data, don't take the child away from us. Don't take Heidi away." Data and Heidi heard the voice. Data had evidently made out the grandmother's words, for she grasped the child's hand still more firmly and ran as fast as she could. Heidi, struggling to get her hand free, cried, "The grandmother is calling. I want to go to her." But that was exactly what the aunt did not want. She tried to soothe the child. "Come quickly now, or it will be too late and we will not be able to continue our journey tomorrow. You will soon see how much you will like Frankfurt. Perhaps you will never want to come back again, but if you do, it will be quite simple. You could even take something home for the grandmother, something she would like." This appealed to Heidi, and she stopped trying to resist and started to run too. After a little while, she asked, "What could I get for grandmother?" "Something nice," said the aunt, Perhaps some nice soft rolls. She would enjoy that. It would be such a change from the dark bread. Oh yes, she always gives it to Peter and says, "It is too hard for me. I have heard her myself," admitted Heidi. "Let us hurry then, Aunt Data. We may reach Frankfurt today, and I shall soon be back with the rolls." And Heidi started to run so fast that the aunt with her bundle could hardly keep pace with her. But she was glad to be having no more difficulty with the child, for now they had almost reached the first houses in Dorfli, and a lot of talk and questions might have made Heidi change her mind again. So Data strode straight ahead, holding Heidi's hand tightly so that everyone would see that she had to hurry along because of the child. To every question she merely answered, "I can't stop now, we have a long way to go." Questions and exclamations came from all sides, and Data was glad that she didn't have to stop and that Heidi didn't say a word, but hurried on eagerly. From that day on, the Alm Uncle looked even more fierce and terrifying when he came down to Dorfli. He spoke to no one and looked most threatening with his cheese basket on his back and his mountain stick in his hand. Everybody was of the same opinion, that it was a great blessing that the child had been taken away. Only the blind grandmother took the old man's part. When people came to the house to give her some spinning to do, she would tell them again and again how kind and good he had been to the child, and what he had done for her and her daughter, how he had spent many afternoons repairing the cottage, which without his help would undoubtedly have collapsed upon them. This story soon got about in Dorfli, but most people thought the grandmother was too old to understand and too blind and hard of hearing to know exactly what went on around her. It was as well it had been repaired, for the Alm Uncle never came to Goat Peter's cottage now, and the grandmother's days were once more passed in sighing and fretting. "Alas, all the joy and happiness is gone with the child," she would say, "and the days are long and dreary. If only I might see Heidi again before I die." Chapter 6. A New Start for Heidi. In the house in Frankfurt, the little daughter of Herr Sesemann sat in the comfortable invalid chair in which all her life was spent, and in which she had to be wheeled from room to room. Now she was in the room which they called the study, and where she had her lessons. Clara's little face was pale and thin, and her soft, gentle blue eyes were fixed at this moment on the door. Today, time seemed to pass very slowly for her, for she was saying rather impatiently, "But isn't it time yet, Fräulein Rottenmeier?" The lady thus addressed sat very upright at a small work table and nodded. Because of her rather odd and very severe style of dress, Fräulein Rottenmeier presented an awe-inspiring appearance. Over her shoulders she wore a cape with a stiff collar, and on her head a very elaborate cap. Since the death of Frau Sesemann several years ago, Fräulein Rottenmeier had acted as housekeeper and manager of the domestic staff. Herr Sesemann very often went off on business trips, leaving Fräulein Rottenmeier in sole charge of the house, stipulating that no decisions should be taken without first consulting his little daughter, and that nothing should be done against her wish. Just as Clara was asking the same question a second time, Data and Heidi arrived at the door. Data rang the bell and the butler came down the stairs, the big round buttons of his livery in keeping with his round eyes, which stared blankly at the two strangers. "I wonder if it is too late to see Fräulein Rottenmeier?" Data asked. Sebastian stared frostily for a moment, then pressed a bell and disappeared without a word. Next a maid appeared. A spotless white cap was perched on top of her head, regarding the visitors haughtily from the top of the stairs. "What is it?" she asked. Data repeated her request. Tinette disappeared, but very soon came back and called from above, "Come this way, you are expected." Data and Heidi went upstairs and followed Tinette into the study. At the door, Data stopped politely, still holding Heidi's hand firmly, for there was no knowing what the child might do in strange surroundings. Fräulein Rottenmeier rose slowly and came forward to examine the new playmate for the daughter of the house. She did not appear to be very pleased with what she saw. Heidi wore her simple little cotton dress and on her head her old crushed straw hat. She gazed innocently from underneath it, staring with unconcealed surprise at the lady's towering headgear. "What is your name?" asked Fräulein Rottenmeier after a lengthy inspection of the child, who had returned her gaze steadily. "Heidi," the child answered distinctly. "What? That is not a Christian name. You were surely not baptized so. What name were you given when you were christened?" "I can't remember now," replied Heidi. "What a foolish answer," exclaimed the lady, shaking her head disapprovingly. "Data, is the child stupid or impertinent?" "I am so sorry. Would you kindly allow me to speak for the child? She is not accustomed to strangers," said Data hastily, secretly nudging Heidi for having given such an unsuitable answer. "She certainly is not stupid nor impertinent. It is just that she always says exactly what she is thinking. This is the first time she has ever been in an upper-class house, and she knows nothing about good manners. She is docile and willing to learn if Madam will have the patience. She was christened Adelaide, for her mother, my late sister." "Well, at least that's a name one can pronounce," remarked Fräulein Rottenmeier. "But Data, I must say that for her age the child looks to me a little strange. I told you that a companion for Fräulein Clara had to be of her age, to be able to share her lessons and everything. Fräulein Clara is 12 now. What is the age of the child?" "With your permission," began Data elaborately, "I am not quite sure myself, but I think she is a little younger, but not much. She will be 10, or perhaps a little more." "I am 8 now, the grandfather said," declared Heidi. The aunt gave her another push, but Heidi had no idea of the reason for this and was not in the least embarrassed. "What? Only 8 years old?" cried Fräulein Rottenmeier indignantly. 4 years younger. What use is that? And what have you learned? Which books did you use for your lessons?" "None," replied Heidi. "What? How did you learn to read?" "I never learned, neither did Peter," said Heidi. "Mercy, you cannot read. Is that true, you cannot read?" demanded Fräulein Rottenmeier, deeply shocked. "What did you learn then?" "Nothing," said Heidi. Data, cried Fräulein Rottenmeier when she had recovered from this shock. This is not the agreement at all. How dare you bring this child to me? But Data was not easily frightened and replied boldly, With Madam's permission, the child is just what I understood Madam wanted. Madam told me she wanted a companion unlike ordinary children. Therefore I chose this one, because the older ones are not so unspoiled. But now I am afraid I must go. My mistress will be expecting me. If I may, I shall come again soon to see how the child is getting on. With a curtsy, Data left the room and quickly ran downstairs. For a moment, Fräulein Rottenmeier was too surprised to speak. Then she ran after Data. There were many things which must be discussed if the child were to stay, and the aunt seemed determined that she should. Heidi still stood by the door. So far Clara had watched silently. Now she beckoned to Heidi to come nearer. Heidi went up to her. Would you rather be called Heidi or Adelaide? Asked Clara. I am always called Heidi, she replied. Then I shall always call you that too, said Clara. I like the name, although never before have I seen a little girl like you. Has your hair always been short and curly like that? Yes, I think so, replied Heidi. Did you come to Frankfurt yesterday? Clara continued to ask. No, today, but tomorrow I am going home again with some white rolls for the grandmother. How strange you are, Clara burst out. You have been brought here to stay with me and share my lessons with me. What fun it will be now because you can't read at all. At least it will be a change. It is usually very dull and the mornings are so long. You see, every morning at 10, my tutor comes and the lessons go on till 2. That is far too long. Sometimes the tutor holds his book close to his face, as if he had suddenly become short-sighted. But I know quite well it is only because he is yawning, and Fräulein Rottenmeier takes out her handkerchief and holds it to her face as if she were affected by what we were reading. But she too only wants to yawn. But I don't dare, because if I only did it once, Fräulein Rottenmeier would fetch the cod liver oil and say I was getting weak again. And the worst thing of all is to take cod liver oil. But it will be much more fun now. I can listen to you learning to read. Heidi shook her head doubtfully at the mention of her learning to read. Of course, Heidi, you have to learn to read. Everybody has to learn to read. And my tutor is very kind. He is never cross, and he will explain everything to you. Just then, Fräulein Rottenmeier came back into the room. She had not succeeded in calling Data back, and was apparently very annoyed about it. Sebastian had opened the folding doors of the study and quietly wheeled Clara into the other room. While he adjusted the chair, Heidi placed herself before him and stared steadily up at him. Well, what is it you are looking at? He grumbled. When Fräulein Rottenmeier returned, she was just in time to hear Heidi say, You look like Peter. She raised her hands in horror. Really, she murmured. She treats the butler as an equal. The child knows absolutely nothing. Sebastian helped Clara to her seat at the table, and Fräulein Rottenmeier seated herself beside her, motioning Heidi to sit opposite. Beside Heidi's plate lay a lovely white roll. She glanced at it happily. The resemblance Heidi had discovered in Sebastian seemed to have given her confidence in him, for she sat as quiet as a mouse until he came to her side to serve the fish Then she pointed to the roll and asked, "May I have it?" Sebastian nodded, glancing sideways at Fräulein Rottenmeier to see what effect the question had had on her. Immediately Heidi took the roll and put it into her pocket. Sebastian hid a smile. Motionless and silent, he stood at her side, waiting for her to take her helping of fish. For a few seconds, Heidi looked at him wonderingly. Then she asked, "May I have a little of that too?" Sebastian nodded again. "Then give me some, please," she said, looking calmly at her plate. At this breach of etiquette, Sebastian was almost in danger of losing control of his features, and the arm which held the dish was beginning to shake. "You can leave the dish on the table and come back afterward," ordered Fräulein Rottenmeier, looking very severe, and Sebastian disappeared at once. "Adelaide, I see I shall have to teach you the first simple rules of good behaviour," said the lady with a deep sigh. "First of all, I will show you how to behave at table." She instructed Heidi thoroughly and clearly on what she had to do. Then she went on to explain, "I must impress upon you, particularly, that you are not to speak to Sebastian at table unless the question or remark is absolutely necessary, and even then you must not address him as a friend. Do you understand? And so with Tinette. You will address me as you hear others do. Clara will decide for herself what you are to call her." "Clara, of course," Clara interrupted. Then followed a long list of rules about getting up and going to bed, about entering and leaving a room, about being tidy and shutting doors. All of a sudden, Heidi's eyes closed, for she had been up since 5 o'clock that morning and had had a long journey. She leaned back in her chair, fast asleep. When Fräulein Rottenmeier had finished her lecture at last, she said, "Now remember everything I have said, Adelaide. Have you understood it all?" "Heidi has been asleep for ever so long," Clara said with amusement. She had not had such an entertaining dinner for a long time. "It is really shocking how much trouble this child is causing," exclaimed Fräulein Rottenmeier angrily, and rang the bell so violently that both Sebastian and Tinette came rushing in. But in spite of all the noise, Heidi slept on, and it was only with great difficulty that they succeeded in awakening her so that she could be shown to her bedroom, which was at the end of a long passage beyond those of Clara and Fräulein Rottenmeier. Chapter 7. An Eventful Day. Heidi awoke in the morning and looked around in bewilderment. She blinked and rubbed her eyes, but it did not help her to remember where she was. She was lying in a high white bed in a big room, and daylight streamed in between long white curtains. There were 2 chairs covered in a floral material. A sofa stood against the wall with a round table in front of it, and in the corner there was a washstand. Suddenly she remembered that she was in Frankfurt, and the events of the previous day came back to her quite clearly. She jumped out of bed and dressed, then went from one window to the other to try to get a glimpse of the sky and the countryside outside. Behind the big curtains, she felt like a bird in a cage. As she could not manage to pull them aside, she crept underneath to get to the window. It was so high that she could only just see over the sill. However, the view was not one of pleasant green fields, but only of walls and windows. Presently there came a knock at the door, and Tinette popped her head round, saying in a bored voice, "Breakfast is ready." Heidi failed to understand that this was an invitation, for the sour expression on Tinette's face had suggested rather a warning to stay away. So it seemed to Heidi, at any rate, and she acted accordingly. She took the little stool from under the table, put it in a corner, sat down, and waited quietly to see what would happen next. After some time, Fräulein Rottenmeier bustled along with a great deal of noise. Once again, she seemed to be thoroughly annoyed and shouted at Heidi, "What is the matter with you, Adelaide? Don't you know what breakfast is? Come along." This Heidi understood and followed at once. Clara had been seated in the dining room for some time, and she greeted Heidi in a friendly way. Her face wore a much happier expression than usual, for she was looking forward to all kinds of unexpected events that day. Breakfast passed without incident. Heidi ate her rolls very nicely, and when they had finished, Clara was wheeled back to the study. Fräulein Rottenmeier told Heidi to follow and remain with Clara until the tutor arrived to begin lessons. As soon as the children were alone together, Heidi asked, "How can I see down to the ground?" "You just open the window and look out," replied Clara, amused. "But the windows won't open," replied Heidi sadly. "Oh yes," Clara assured her, "but you can't do it alone, neither can I. But if you see Sebastian, he will open them for you." Heidi sighed with relief, for the house had begun to make her feel as though she were a prisoner. Then Clara began to ask Heidi about her home, and Heidi was delighted to tell her all about the Alm, and the goats and the pasture, and everything that was dear to her. In the meantime, the tutor arrived, but Fräulein Rottenmeier did not show him into the study as usual. She wanted to talk to him first, and led him to the dining room. There, in great agitation, she began to describe to him the awkward situation which had arisen, and told him how, some time ago, she had persuaded her Sesamon to get a companion for Clara. She recounted how dreadfully she had been deceived, and told the tutor how, in view of Heidi's complete ignorance, he would have to begin at the very beginning with the ABC, and how she herself had had to give the child instruction on the simplest rules of behaviour. There was only one way out of the situation, in Fräulein Rottenmeier's opinion, and that was for the tutor to insist that it was impossible to teach two children so far apart in age. That would be a very good reason for her Sesamon to send the child back home. Her Sesamon knew the child had arrived, and without his consent, Fräulein Rottenmeier could not send her away. However, the tutor was cautious and unwilling to commit himself. With many words of comfort, he assured Fräulein Rottenmeier that though the child was backward in some things, she might be quite advanced in other respects, and that regular lessons might very well restore the balance. When Fräulein Rottenmeier at last realised that she would get very little support from the tutor, she opened the door to the study and allowed him to go through to the children. Before many minutes had passed, a dreadful noise came from the study. Then there was a loud cry from Sebastian. Fräulein Rottenmeier rushed in to find the whole room in complete disorder. Books, copybooks, inkstand, and across the table onto the floor and across the carpet, there flowed a stream of ink. Heidi was nowhere to be seen. "What is all this?" cried Fräulein Rottenmeier. "Carpet, books, work basket, everything covered with ink. I never saw such a mess. I have no doubt that wretched child is to blame." The tutor looked very distressed, but Clara was following events with obvious amusement. "Yes, Heidi did it, but not on purpose. She mustn't be punished. It was just that she was in such a hurry to get away that she tugged the tablecloth, and then everything fell on the floor. She wanted to see the carriages passing. That's why she rushed out. Perhaps she has never seen one before." "What did I tell you? The creature doesn't know the first thing. She has no idea what a lesson is, that she must sit still and listen. But where is the little troublemaker? Surely she hasn't run away. Whatever will Herr Sesamon say?" Fräulein Rottenmeier ran downstairs. There stood Heidi in the open doorway, looking out into the street in complete bewilderment. "What is the matter? What are you thinking of to run away like that?" Fräulein Rottenmeier shouted at the child. "I thought I heard the fir trees rustling, but I can't find them, and I don't hear them any more," said Heidi disconsolately, turning her head in the direction of the disappearing carriages. The rumbling of their wheels had seemed to her like the howling of the wind in the fir trees at home, and she had tried to follow the sound. "Fir trees, what nonsense! Do you think we live in a wood? Come and see the mess you have made." Heidi followed Fräulein Rottenmeier upstairs. She gazed in astonishment at the havoc she had created, for in her haste to get downstairs she had noticed nothing. "You won't do this a second time," warned Fräulein Rottenmeier. "During lessons you will sit still and pay attention. And if you can't do that, I will have to tie you to your chair. Do you understand?" "Yes," said Heidi. "I shall be good now." Sebastian and Tinette were called in to restore order, and the tutor went away because there could be no more lesson that day. There had not even been time for yawning. Clara always rested in the afternoons, so Heidi was told she might do as she pleased. This suited her perfectly because there was something she very much wanted to do, but she needed assistance, and for this reason she posted herself in front of the dining room door, right in the centre of the hall, so she would not miss the person to whom she wished to speak. It was not very long before Sebastian came upstairs, carrying a large tray. "Is there something the little Fräulein wants?" inquired Sebastian, carrying the silver into the dining room. "How do you open a window, Sebastian?" "Like this." And he opened one of the large windows in the dining room. Heidi crossed over to the window, but she was not tall enough to be able to see out. "Here you are," said Sebastian, bringing a high stool. "Now the little Fräulein can see everything that is going on in the street down below." Cheerfully Heidi climbed up and at last managed to see out of the window. Greatly disappointed, she withdrew her head almost at once. "But I can only see the stony street, nothing else," she said sadly. "If you go round the house, what do you see on the other side, Sebastian?" "Just the same," he replied. "But where have you to go to see over the whole valley?" she asked. "Then you must climb a high tower or a church steeple, like that one with a golden ball. From there you can see ever so far." At that, Heidi quickly jumped down from her stool and raced downstairs into the street. But it was not so easy as she had imagined. When she saw the steeple from the window, it looked as though she had only had to cross the street to reach it. But although she had walked right down the street, she had not come to the steeple, and she could not even see it any longer. She walked on and on. Many people passed, but they all seemed to be in such a hurry that Heidi did not like to stop any of them to ask the way. Then Heidi saw a boy standing on the street corner with a barrel organ, and perched on his arm a very strange looking little animal. Heidi went forward and asked, "Where is the tower with the golden ball on the top?" "Don't know," answered the boy. "Who can tell me then?" asked Heidi. "Don't know." "Don't you know of any church with a high steeple?" "Yes, I know one." "Well then, come and show it to me." "You show me first what you will give me for it," said the boy, holding his hand out. Heidi searched in her pocket and found a pretty little card on which was printed a wreath of red roses. It was not easy to part with it, for it had been given to her by Clara only that morning. But she longed to be able to look down over the green slopes into the valley. "There," said Heidi, "would you like this?" The boy withdrew his hand and shook his head. "What do you want then?" asked Heidi, cheerfully putting away her little picture. "Money," said the boy. "I haven't got any now, but Clara will give me some later. How much do you want?" 2 pence. "Well, come along then." They walked down a long street, and on the way Heidi asked her companion what he was carrying on his back. He told her it was a barrel organ, which played beautiful music when you turned the handle. All at once they found themselves in front of an old church with a high steeple. The boy stood still and pointed at it. "But how can I get in?" asked Heidi when she saw that the doors were closed. "Don't know," came the reply. "Perhaps I could ring the bell as we do for Sebastian." Heidi had discovered a bell in the wall, which she now pulled as hard as she could. "When I go up, you must wait here for me, for I don't know my way back, and you must show it to me." "What will I get for it?" "What do you want?" "Another 2 pence." They heard steps inside, and the door creaked open. An old man appeared, looking first surprised and then angry when he saw the children. "How dare you ring the bell like that?" he shouted at them. "Can't you read the notice? Visitors wishing to go to the top of the tower, please ring." The boy said nothing but pointed to Heidi. "But that's just what I want," said Heidi. "Why do you want to go up there?" asked the caretaker. "Did somebody send you?" "No," said Heidi. "I would just like to go up to the top and look down." "Be off with you, and don't dare to try this trick on me again," said the old man, and was about to close the door. But Heidi grasped his coat and cried beseechingly, "Let me go up just once." The imploring look in Heidi's eyes made the old man change his mind. He took her hand and said kindly, "If you really want it so much, I will take you up." The boy sat down on the stone steps and prepared to wait. Together, Heidi and the old man climbed many, many steps, which became smaller and smaller as they went up, until at last a very narrow little stair led up to the top of the tower. The caretaker lifted Heidi up to let her see out of the window. "Now you can look down," he said. Heidi saw nothing but roofs, steeples, and chimneys. She withdrew her head presently and said, very dispiritedly, "It is not at all as I expected." "There, you see how a little one like you knows nothing about views. Now come down and never ring my bell again." The old man put Heidi back down on the floor and went ahead of her down the narrow stair. When the steps got broader, they came to the caretaker's little room, and beside it, underneath the sloping roof, stood a big basket. In front of it sat a big grey cat, which snarled and spat because inside the basket lived her family, and she wanted to warn everybody not to meddle with them. Heidi looked at her in amazement. She had never seen such a big cat. There were scores of mice in the old tower, and the cat had no difficulty in catching half a dozen every day for her kittens. The caretaker saw the look of delight on Heidi's face and said, "Come, she won't hurt you when I am here. You may still look at the kittens." Heidi went over to the basket and exclaimed joyfully, "Oh, what sweet little kittens!" "Would you like one?" asked the old man as he watched Heidi with amusement. "For myself to keep?" whispered Heidi, who was hardly able to believe her luck. "Yes, you can have them all if you like," he said, thinking this would be a better way of getting rid of them than drowning. Heidi was overjoyed. There was certainly plenty of room in the big house, and how happy the kittens would make Clara. "But how can I carry them away?" asked Heidi, picking some of them up. The big cat sprang at her arm and hissed at her so fiercely that she shrank back. "I will bring them to you if you will tell me the address," said the old man. "Her sesamens, on the door there is a dog's head with a gold ring in its mouth." The caretaker did not need such a detailed description. He had been in the church for many years and knew every house in the district. "I know the house. If only I could take one or two with me, one for me and one for Clara. May I?" "Yes, take them." Heidi's eyes shone with delight. She chose a white one and a tabby, and put one into her right and one into her left pocket. Then they went downstairs. The boy was still sitting on the steps outside. He jumped up when he saw Heidi, and in a short time they reached the house. Heidi rang the bell and Sebastian opened the door. When he saw Heidi, he hustled her inside. "Quickly, into the dining room. They are all at table, and Fräulein Rottenmeier looks like a loaded cannon. But why did you run away like that?" Heidi went into the room. Fräulein Rottenmeier did not look up. Clara said nothing, and it was an altogether uneasy atmosphere. When Heidi was seated, Fräulein Rottenmeier began in a very severe and solemn voice. "Adelaide, I shall talk to you afterward. I will only say now that you have behaved exceedingly badly. Leaving the house without permission Your conduct is unparalleled." "Meow." It sounded like an answer. Now the lady's temper rose. "What, Adelaide? You are as rude as well as naughty. I warn you." "I didn't," began Heidi. "Meow, meow." Sebastian could conceal his amusement no longer and had to leave the room. "That will do," Fräulein Rottenmeier tried to say, but her voice cracked with excitement. "Get up and leave the room." Heidi, frightened, got up and tried to explain. "I really didn't." "Meow, meow." "But Heidi," Clara said reproachfully, "when you see it makes Fräulein Rottenmeier angry, why do you go on saying meow?" "I didn't. It is the kittens." "What? Cats?" screamed Fräulein Rottenmeier. "Oh, Sebastian, Tinette, find the horrid animals. Remove them at once." The lady rushed into the study and locked the door, for she disliked cats more than anything. Sebastian had to wait outside the door until his face was straight again. When he had served Heidi, he had noticed the little kitten's head peeping out of her pocket. When at last he entered the room, everything seemed quiet and peaceful again. Clara had the kittens on her lap, and Heidi knelt beside her. Both played happily with the two tiny animals. "Sebastian," said Clara, "you must help us to find a place for the kittens where Fräulein Rottenmeier will not find them, because she is afraid of them and wants to get rid of them. Where can we put them?" "I shall see to that, Fräulein Clara," replied Sebastian willingly. "I shall prepare a nice bed in a basket and put it in a place where Madame is not likely to go. Rely on me." Much later, Fräulein Rottenmeier opened the door an inch or two and called through the slit, "Are the horrid animals away?" "Yes, yes," answered Sebastian, quietly collecting the kittens from Clara's lap and disappearing with them. The lecture for Heidi was put off until the following day, as Fräulein Rottenmeier felt too exhausted and retired quietly. Clara and Heidi went cheerfully to bed, knowing that the kittens were all right.